Welcome, everyone, to Love, Sex, and Leadership. I am in Bali. It is a new year. I'm in my beautiful new home. Very exciting, feeling very rested and relaxed, and very excited for today's conversation. Bringing Stephen McGhee, who I did years ago, the master's degree I did in spiritual psychology. They offered a kind of an advanced coaching program, and Stephen was one of the individuals running that program. And that program, that year program in and of itself, really shifted the way in which I show up as a coach. And there's so much that this man brings in his presence, in his leadership, just in the way in which he really commands and listens deeply into a room. So I'm excited to see where today's conversation goes. He's been teaching and speaking in this world for a long time, and someone I've seen do amazing adventures in the world, is leading a lot of powerful men as well, and very excited to bring him to the show today. Welcome, Stephen.
Aaron, it's good to be with you. It's been a while since we've seen each other, but I'm just noticing, one of the things about teaching is learning. And I always feel like we're all teaching what we so desperately want to learn. And I want to reflect back to you how much I've watched you learn as well. What I've watched you create, that you're living in Bali, that your coaching practice has exploded since we were together in a room in probably 2015 or 2016. And to see that you're building this home in Bali is all extraordinary. So it's my honor, privilege to be here. I'm blessed and grateful. So thank you for being a voice in the world through your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I always appreciate looking at the different timelines of life and the timelines that different people come into and observe and witness. And I remember seeing a timeline that in that time you had just done a really powerful journey with a group of guys up Aconcagua, I think a couple of years before that or around that time. I don't remember the exact time. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, like I really appreciate what this man is doing, not just for himself, but also with kind of the world of adventure and supporting men to get out of their own way and really reach for a deeper level of goals. And it really set a certain kind of North Star for my own awareness in terms of some of the things I want to be achieving and creating and doing. Just this last year, we ended up postponing it a year. But I was in the process of creating such a trip with my dear brother Jamin, who's also been on the podcast. So yeah, just it's important for me in this journey to have individuals as yourself who are moving ahead and really doing powerful work, things that I can look up to and I can be guided by and supported by. And that's really how you've showed up initially into my life. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, as I said earlier, and I know Jamin, so it's good to. I can see how you guys would be connected. He's a brother. Aconcagua project, the Aconcagua Man project, was really miraculous on many levels. Nature, for me, is a great teacher. I find that nature coherence is an important piece for all of us, not just men but women. And for those of your listeners that might be interested, I'm happy to put the link to the documentary film that we created from that project and give a code to everybody so that they can watch that 50, 60-minute film for it's taught me a lot.
Amazing. That's great. Yeah, so let's look at that actually, because nature is something that I'm quite connected to. I know you are as well. You lived in Colorado a while. You're now out in California. Like, how would you utilize, or how do you utilize nature as in its coherence to support in the growth and the awareness of someone in their potentiality and who they're showing up? Like, what is your teaching relationship with nature as a vessel and vehicle for growth and evolution?
Well, it's so broad, right? Like this, Aaron. There's so much to nature, but I mean, I think if I just rattled off some things I think are important, and we can decide what we might want to go more deeply into. But I think firstly, listening to
Mm,
nature. What does nature have to teach me when I listen? What can I hear from the wind? What can I hear from the ground? What can I hear from animals and creatures? What can I just hear by sitting in the silence of nature? Am I willing to get up in the morning and see the sunrise and reset my circadian rhythm so that my sleep is better? So it might impact my vitality if I'm coherent with nature. What happens if I take off my rubber shoes and I walk on the beach upon the surf and have the inflammation be taken away from my body? If I do that regularly, these are things that nature offers. And I often say, Aaron, what's normal isn't normal. So a lot of people, leaders in the world, business people, are struggling with things, maladies that aren't necessary. And it's hard to meet a vision of leadership if someone doesn't feel good, if someone's not resting well. So to me, the connection between nature, leadership, results in the world are real important. And a lot of people are just sort of separate from it. I bet in Bali, where you live, you see a lot more people that are coherent with nature, but I don't know, maybe not.
there's definitely a fair more of it. Yeah, I mean, I think if we look at major cities in the world, though, the people in the kind of the hustle and bustle and grind of life, there's a lot of disconnection from that nature. I'd love to dive deeper into the circadian rhythms. I know you mentioned that you're kind of diving deeper into some biology pieces and just how our body is working in synchronicity with nature itself, and how those, I'd say, the rhythms of nature and the rhythms of life work into your day-to-day life. That's something that's always important to me. Like, I teach a lot of groups and retreats, but what's most valuable is how is someone waking up every morning and being with themselves. So how does that show up for you in your day-to-day life as living and breathing in this world with those rhythms?
Well, I think for a while it was a discipline. Like it was something where I could choose to lay in bed and sleep longer and miss the sunrise. But then I found I was having trouble getting into deep sleep at night. So then, at first glance, it was, what's the discipline? Well, the discipline's to get up, to get outside, to get my feet on the sand where I live, to walk on the beach and watch the sunrise.
Mm,
And I mean, it's simple, but the science behind it is pretty profound in that the sunrise will reset our entire body clock. So even if I'm traveling and I'm in different time zones, it's something I do my very best to practice. So if I go to the East Coast, I'm still want to get up and get that sunrise in because my body knows what to do with it. It's like telling my brain what to do. The other
mm,
side of that coin, as you well know, Aaron, and I'm sure you're practicing a lot of these things, if not all of these things too, but blue light at night,
mm,
it just, turned dark here. It's a little bit after 5 p.m. my time. And pretty soon I'll probably be putting on my glasses because I'm in front of blue light. And it's
mhm,
just telling my brain it's daylight when it's not. So these are simple
mhm,
things that most people know today. But I find once people really practice it, so we move from the discipline to the practice. And when it becomes a practice, it's really miraculous what can happen.
mm,
I run programs where people practice this and they often report back, oh my God, my mood's better. My mind is thinking more clearly. I'm sleeping better. All these wonderful attributes that come from it. And it doesn't cost a thing. It's not
mhm,
like we need a
mhm,
big pharma pill for it. We can just get out and
mhm,
watch the sunrise.
mhm, mhm. And what, I mean, you've been working with people a long time, and you've seen a lot of the patternings. Like, what do you find really gets in the way for someone in general? I mean, you can go into specifics if it feels right, to really, you could say, be their best version of themselves, to show up, as a powerful being that's here to make a difference on the planet. Like, what is it that gets in the way? Is it the day-to-day practice? Is it, them just actually not believing in themselves? Like, where is it, do you feel like people struggle the most in this journey, in this journey of transformation of this work you and I are both doing?
Well, probably. I mean, you know me well enough to know, like, I don't believe in gurus. Like, I think the day of the guru is gone. So I don't know that I have an answer for it really. But if
Hmm.
I had to guess for myself, and I would say probably other people might relate to this, it's what I spoke to earlier. So what's normal isn't normal.
Hmm.
So let's say it's normal for someone to work till 6:30, 7 p.m., eat dinner at 8 o'clock, eat processed foods at 8 o'clock at night, and then watch Netflix for 3 hours and then go to bed. This is considered normal,
Hmm.
but is
Hmm.
it productive? And so I would say try the other way and see, not as a judgment, not like I'm not judging it. I'm just saying what does a person really want? But to answer your question more specifically, what I think happens is people just get used to it and they just start feeling like this automatic reoccurring behavior is just part of life. It's just how we feel. It's normal to be tired. It's normal to work that many hours without taking care of self. So that's what I think. I just think it becomes over time something we become numb to. And when we become numb to it,
Hmm.
we think it's normal. And when we think it's normal, we just don't think it could ever be different. And so it becomes, we kind of accept that that's the way it goes. So I think a person has to kind of say, what do I want?
Hmm.
And what would I
Hmm.
like to change? This is a great time to have the podcast. I'm not a big New Year's resolution guy myself, but I think if someone is, it's a great time of year to say, what would I like this year to look like? How do I want to lead better, more differently, more effectively? How could I open my heart more fully and love more and be in
Hmm.
relationship more with myself and others? So all of that, I think, is to your great question. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on it, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you for that. And I think one of the things you speak into at the end, I really relate to, and this is a place of love. Like, I find that if I'm not doing what I love, if I'm not enjoying what I do, then there's some part of me that's numbing away into life, that's numbing away into this kind of false preconception of who I think I need to be. And that's generally what I feel like when people break down other people's values of who they've tried to become as a result of some point of authority, some, parental figure, or any of those aspects, and actually get to, fall in love with the raw, essential self of who they are, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily know. Like, I think we're so used to being in a comparative culture that's always trying to, like, oh, well, what's good for that person? Oh, what's good for Steven? Oh, what's working there? It's like, well, what's actually working inside of ourselves? And this is a place I feel, brings the aliveness. And for, I guess a question for you in this, and this is good. It's like, because in this realm of coaching and having impact and having leadership in people's lives, there's a natural point where someone almost wants to idolize you. And I know the guru is dead, and I agree with that as well. But there's also the place of, like, people like, oh, yeah, like you're coaching someone. They're like, oh my God, you're doing life well. Like, you're doing this and you're setting up and you're creating these things. And there's this idolization that happens in the point of a leadership authority. So how do you, as the point of being a leader, both, like, recognize that judgment and that, being kind of put on the pedestal or some way, shape, or form is there, but not necessarily allow the ego identification to it? Like, what's been your journey with that? Because you've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure you've had moments and experiences of this happening with clients.
Well, my learning has all come from pain. So,
Mm.
you know, I've been doing this. I've been doing this work, coaching, leadership work, speaking, all that for over 30 years.
Mm.
So I would tell you that my journey has been one of really surrendering the ego,
Mm,
letting go of that, like I'm somehow the authority. And how does one do that? Well, I've done it by becoming more vulnerable, like being
mhm,
more open-hearted with the people I'm working with, or just how I live my life, because I have
mm,
never met a human being, even those that I've known a few teachers in my life that I would say, well, they were probably one for sure. I would say he was illumined, but even
mhm,
he was highly vulnerable,
mhm,
even though
mhm,
he carried so much light and love, like could walk in a room and just the presence of who he was transformative, had a
mm,
high degree of vulnerability. So I think somebody that is positioning as an authority ought to, in my opinion, it's like, be careful. I don't want the karma of that. I don't
mhm,
want the responsibility of that. I want my client to find their authentic voice
mm,
through a conversation that has them emerge as the guru for themselves. And I think
mhm,
the only
mhm,
one we want to be a guru for is ourselves. I think the only
mm,
one, reflections are great. Like you and I can be brothers and we can talk. And I could go, Aaron, have you considered this? You could go, Stephen, have you considered this? And through that reflection, if I'm honest, I go, yeah, I hear that. Like I've heard that before. So that
mhm,
feedback has value to me.
mm,
So
mm.
I think this journey is, I love that you brought this up, because I know enough about you and your work to know that you position yourself similarly. You're not like, I have all the answers for anything or anybody. And I think
Exactly.
that's important these days, especially with the leadership and the coaching space. It's exploded since I've been in it.
Mhm,
I don't
mhm,
even recognize it anymore, Aaron. I mean,
mm.
it's on a way to be $100 billion space in the next three
Wow.
to 5 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of people
Mm,
entering this space.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and the thing that
How do
I
you hear
see,
all that? How does
well, I relate to that, and I think that's one of the pieces when if I look back to whatever that was, 7, 8 years ago when we met, like that was one of the things I really appreciated about you is I felt that you were an individual that was holding yourself at a point of leadership, but you weren't like, come put me on a pedestal. So, like, I'm the same as you, and I want to see you grow and expand the same way I'm growing, expanding, and my vulnerability is my power. And that was really supportive for me because that's what feels intuitive and accurate. And I guess in this $100 billion coaching space that's growing, what I do witness, and I have thoughts and observations, and I'm just experiencing it happening, is like there is that place where because of Instagram, because of social media, it's almost like part of the marketing place of how people present themselves is, look at me, life is so great. Like I even struggled, just yesterday I put up a post about, my new house and kind of celebrating it and just recognizing a dream coming into creation. But I know for some people that like that's like they've had challenges to achieve their goals and dreams and visions. And I'm sharing that just like for me as a man, I'm not always celebrating myself, and I'm often always thinking about the next thing I want to achieve. So I'm actually trying to slow down enough to say, wow, okay, Aaron, you've done well. Just let it sit in, rather than going to the next thing. So yeah, this place of the growing industry of self-development, I feel there's a natural part where if people's ego aren't in check, then there's the egoic idolization that happens of these figures that are quote leading the life of their dreams, and I'm just trying to become that. And it makes me a little bit sad inside, and it's also the place, especially I'm teaching a lot of groups and retreats of like people coming up at the end and saying, "Oh my God, it's so amazing!" And it's like, yes, but that's also inside of you. So it's a constant place of trying to give that power and authority. And I think this is the place of a curiosity of your take on this. It's like there is a natural place of power a leader holds when they're in front of a group. There is a natural place of power a leader holds when they're, you know, having a large impact in someone's life. So, what have you done inside yourself to consciously and vulnerably like not allow that projected power to get to your own head, to meet it vulnerably? What has been some of the practices and things that you've consciously done to support yourself in this dance of power in your life, in this 30 years you've been doing this work?
It's a great question. I mean, I think, this is pretty generic what I'm going to say, but awareness is often curative. So
Mm,
I would say, step one is be aware. Like,
mm-hmm,
how am I impacting my world? How am I impacting a room? How am I impacting the barista at the coffee shop? How am I impacting myself through my own thinking? How aware am I of that? And am I slowed down enough to be able to hear that, to be able to see that? And then I pivot right away to the spiritual principles that I adhere to. One of those is cooperation. So, am I cooperating with my environment? Am I cooperating in the boardroom when I'm leading a CEO and the other people in the boardroom to a solution or a decision? Are they cooperating? And if they're not cooperating, can I demonstrate cooperation and acceptance and alignment in a boardroom or in a meeting or in a retreat? And so I'm looking for a highest good. If I'm looking
mm-hmm,
for a highest good, it might mean someone else has the solution, not me. And
mm-hmm,
that's where
mm-hmm,
cooperation and collaboration come in. So the old model of leadership, as you know, Aaron, was because I think you have a background in the military, right? So
mm-hmm,
the military command and control leader was a tell leader, and maybe for
mm-hmm,
good reason in some situations in the military. But that has all changed to me. That's like old. And so
mm-hmm,
one
mm-hmm,
simple thing I do instead of tell is I ask. I
mm,
say, what are the top three things you think we should do? What are the things you want to talk about today? What are the things you're learning about? Just like you did when we hopped on for 2 minutes before we went live.
mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
this isn't me being some expert guru on your podcast. This is me co-creating with you something
mm,
that might have value for your listeners.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
that's how I approach it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I really heard you say is slowing down enough to listen. It's like slowing down enough to actually listen to nature, to listen to what's being present, and to get out of the way. I, often say to myself, can I let like the personality of Aaron Kleinerman get out of the way to allow some greater soul, greater essence of my beingness to express itself through. And that to me is really what I hear in the slowing down enough to listen. And you mentioned in our quick kind of check-in that you're doing a talk on the art of listening, and really, one of your keynotes that you're offering is like in deep listening. And I'd love to just, for the listeners who are here listening, for you to express around, what is the in Stephen's world, the art of listening? What is that beautiful gift that I see you do it well? I see it in our communication right here. Like there's a conscious part of you that's simultaneously expressing as well as being attuned to the awareness and the things that I'm expressing through. So what is it for you that really is the art of deep listening?
Yeah, a great question. I think I'll start by saying the most powerful attribute for great leadership at this time on the planet is listening.
Mm,
And that would not have been true from my experience 10, 15 years ago, not anywhere near. It was I'm the authority, here's what I think you should do.
mhm,
So
mhm,
first of all, to understand listening, like I think most people think listening is listening for content. Most people aren't listening at all for even content, because when the second somebody says something that they might have a disagreement to,
mm,
there's a tendency for people to move into defense
mm,
or to
mm,
move into what am I going to say back? So if, for example, when you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to say next? Like, I don't want to look stupid on the podcast, so I better be thinking about what I'm going to say. I've stopped listening if I do that with you. And so there's a space, and it's deep. That's why I call it the power of deep listening. It's deep inside us, and it's so quiet
mm,
that I can absorb not only the content of what another person's saying, but the context of
mm,
what you're
mm,
saying. Because most
mhm,
people are saying things they might have said before, but really deep listeners are always creating anew. It's like fresh soil. It's like it's a fresh idea. That's what
mhm,
comes from deep listening. So I'm not
mm,
thinking about what I'm going to say when I'm listening to you. I'm actually listening to you because we have a space, Aaron. You and
mm,
I have a unique space, and any of your listeners, if I were talking to them or you were talking to them, I call it the third space. And I've
mm,
written about this on my blog a few times. So, our space, your soul, my soul, has a third space that's unique to any other space ever created because it's
mm,
your
mm,
uniqueness and my uniqueness in this space. And
mhm,
we're creating in this space a listening for whatever gets created here. So, we'll never have this conversation exactly the same way, you and I,
mhm, mhm,
because I'm mostly listening. I say mostly listening because as much as I've practiced it, I'd be lying if I said I'm always listening because I'm not. I have my identity, the Stephen personality that comes in and says, you know, say this or say that or whatever the thing is. But if we can surrender in a conversation and cooperate in a conversation and allow the third space to emerge, it's pretty fucking potent to do that because something comes from it that's powerful. But it's through
mhm,
listening that that happens. So leaders
mm,
often don't listen. They want to tell
mm,
often because
mhm,
they think
mhm,
they know because they're the leader and the leader's
mm,
supposed to know the answer. I just say that's old. It's passé. It's time to recreate leadership from a place of deep listening. In my
mm,
view, in my view.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. And really, what I'm hearing and what you share is the place of soul leadership. It's the listening beyond the personality, attempting to prove itself and value its worth in the world, but rather the place of the essence of the soul that's getting revealed through moment to moment conversational dynamics and the art of creation that's happening in a symbiotic dance with another, with others, with a group. And a few weeks ago, I had also on the podcast a friend of mine who does a lot of kind of conscious facilitation work, and we were talking about that when you're working with a group, like having kind of that general outline of where you think you're going to go, but actually the greatest gift being, can I simultaneously listen to where this group is taking me rather than trying to take the group somewhere, and actually the listening to, because there you have many souls that are speaking, and it's like creating this symbiotic dance together. So actually the art of listening in that moment for me, and this is one of the challenges and the gifts, it's like, can I listen to many souls to see where it is, where's the natural journey wanting to be taken towards? And that's yeah, it's a challenge and a beauty in that. I'm wondering, because we're talking about the one-to-one dynamic, but what's been some of your experience in that deep listening, both to a crowd of people you might be speaking to, as well as a group of people that you're, let's say, at a board meeting where there's a group synergy that's alive. How does that deep listening apply to not just the one-to-one dynamic, but the group field in of itself?
Well, I feel and I believe, and probably your friend that you interviewed recently on conscious facilitation is probably excellent at this. But I think that it's incumbent upon us as we facilitate, as we lead groups, to create a space where people can really surrender and suspend judgment so that something does get created through the collaboration of the hearts and minds in the room. So for me, I'll give you one nuanced example. Like if I said, I think we should blah, 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 or I think all of you should blah, blah, blah. The second I've said that, I've created resistance in the listening of a group because I've said what I think you should do. And it would be natural for any ego to go, well, not me. Fuck that. I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to do that. That's not right for me. So I might use more universal language. And I might say, each of us might want to consider this as a possibility. And now the person can actually receive the content in the context of a suggestion and try it on. And if they try it on and it fits, then bingo. If they try it on and it doesn't fit, then bingo. Do you hear? Like there's it's not like right or wrong. It's not like if you take my suggestion, it's better. It's just a suggestion from my experience. So I just think what we're talking about is a major solution to a very critical time on the planet. And we see it in social media, Aaron, we see it in politics, we see it in business. The second someone says, I voted for this and you voted for that, there's an immediate, oftentimes disagreement. So there's no conversation for diversity or learning or alignment. So we'd be shocked. And I've tried this, I've practiced this in my own life. Like you and I, for sure, we don't agree on everything. How could we? We're two different people with two different parents and experiences and life. But if I have the attitude that we have more in alignment than not, we might find that even though we have complete different ideas on XYZ, that there's more alignment there than we thought. And we can learn from each other now. And now a solution emerges that everybody can participate in. And that can happen with one-on-one, you and I talking, or in a larger group. It can even happen in large groups. People are always listening. Even in a huge stadium, a concert, there's a listening with let's say 60,000 people listening to a rock star. But what are we listening for? Are we listening for that? Because that's a good example, really, because if you love that musician, you already have a listening that they're good and you love them. That's what you feel in a stadium. But if someone came on stage that you thought was a different genre of music or something, would you listen? Or would you immediately assume you're not going to like this one over that one? And you can feel it in the listening of tens of thousands of people. And then you'll hear a boo. You'll hear on a sports field, you'll hear a boo because the coach didn't do what I thought they should do. So it's everywhere listening.
Yeah. It's I like that example. And actually the audience informing, if you will, informing what it is that's happening on the greater collective. So I want to slightly shift gears because I want to, something that came up actually last night with a client I was working with, and you mentioned it earlier, and I'd love to get, your deeper insights, thoughts, perspectives on this place of pain, pain and failure as something that, and also connects a bit to what we were just speaking into, something that the human personality is often very afraid of, the pleasure-seeking part of us and the pain-avoiding part of us, yet recognizing that it's through failure that we have some of our greatest learnings. It's through pain that we have some of our greatest learnings. But how to, what has been some of your own personal journeys with that? And also B, how to support someone to actually more lovingly appreciate the gifts of pain, because it doesn't always feel good. Like when something falls apart or we fail at something, or some financial desire completely dissolves and we realize, oh, wow, I failed at this, or, that was, I can feel the pain of it. and the natural part of our human personality that sometimes is avoidant of like not wanting to have pain because we think pleasure is better. Like how do we work with this in a more cohesive way, and what's some of the things you've done personally as well as with working with others?
Well, great question. I mean, I'm just sitting with it, and I think that it has a lot to do with expectation. So
Mm,
the expectation would be that this woman would never have a business failure. Like don't start a business to fail it. You start a business to succeed and make great margins on the bottom line and support the community or whatever your vision is. And then it doesn't happen. So your expectation didn't get met. So right there is where people start to get in trouble. And I
mm,
spoke earlier of a higher good. So we all know, I suspect all your listeners have heard this before, so pardon me for repeating it, but all suffering comes from arguing with reality.
mm,
So
mm,
I'm definitely going to suffer because I'm arguing now with what's actually happened. Like it
mhm,
should have been
mhm,
different. My business should have succeeded. Should have is the key access to what? The judgment.
mm, mhm,
So it should have
mhm,
succeeded. So now I'm in judgment because my expectation didn't get met. So rather than getting the learning, what would I do next time? What was valuable about this for my soul, for my spirit to grow from this failure, this expectation that didn't get met? And what would I do differently? I can't get that because now I'm in judgment.
mm,
And
mm,
if I'm in judgment, then it gets locked in as a karmic pattern, in my opinion. And if
mm,
it gets locked in as a karmic pattern, it's like we start to create a new because now there's like in my view, the spirit wants to make sure we get the lesson. So then it comes around again. We'll see this often in relationship.
mhm,
Like we'll
mhm.
break up with someone and then 9 months later we're in a relationship. It's like, oh shit, this is the same thing I had with so and so, and now it's back again. It looks different. It's a different face, it's different body, it's different sex, it's different whatever. But it's like the pattern's the same. So what does one do? Stop judging, suspend the
Mm,
judgment, forgive the judgment, and
mm,
watch expectations, watch comparisons, which you spoke to earlier. I mean, how do you
mhm.
hear all that, Aaron? That's a lot we're saying in a short amount of time, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I receive that, and I think in principle, people can there can be an understanding. Like I can have an understanding of suspending the judgments, and recognizing that my judgments are creating my reality, and then it's the what I would reference kind of the core rewiring of our beliefs, because often the source to which these present day judgments are coming from the beliefs that were formed at very young primal ages of our development, that even though we can have a conscious understanding that no, I shouldn't be judging and that's not creating it, it's like there's still the cellular memory inside of us that's creating that same pattern over and over again, just because there's a belief inside that's saying nope, nope, this is bad things are going to happen, it's not safe to do this, I'm unworthy, whatever the core beliefs are. I love the reference. I don't know if you've seen, have you watched the Inside Out movies, the kind of cartoon
I
Disney
watched the
animation
first one.
movies?
Yeah.
Watch the second one when you get a chance, because it really like
Okay.
there's a scene in it that goes into this exact principle, and I love how they've depicted this in animation and everything else. But this like core belief that gets ingrained in us that then creates our reality moving forward, and this to me is like the very essence of this work is, can I help someone rewire that core belief to essentially know themselves as love, not as the fear, not as the
Mm,
unworthiness, not as the, I'm not good enough, all of these things, to actually intrinsically know at a deep cellular root, I am love. I am worthy of love exactly as I am, and I don't need to prove that to anyone. And I think that the proving and the expectation is what gets in the way of actually appreciating reality and not fighting with reality. Is my perspective on that.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. I love what you're saying about the root, like to get to the cause of it. Like, what's the core belief? What's the core limitation? What's the core wound? How do I pull that up? Through compassionate self forgiveness is one way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a question of that inside of the work that you're doing and you've seen is like this dance between our consciousness and our somatics, this dance between what our mind understands and what our body dictates, and both how you've supported others as well as how you've seen that in your own life. Let's say, personally in relationship, like you're referencing. I definitely had that experience years ago, having the same relationship with the same woman, just with a different name, over and over and over again, and realizing, wow, okay, there's a pattern here, Aaron. Time to look at that pattern. Definitely, when we met, I was running that pattern quite strongly. But like that deep rewiring and how you've been able to move that into more successful, healthy relationships, especially in your own personal life. Like how's that worked for you?
It's a well, again, it's a journey, right? And I
Yeah.
think the first thing is, and I know you've done this, Aaron, because I've actually heard you speak to this before. But it's like, so I can look at the pattern in another person pretty easily. It's harder for me to look at the pattern in me. Like,
Mm,
what is my pattern that I'm running that isn't my highest good, or it might be my highest good, but it might not be fun, or it might not be serving me.
mhm,
So the way I work it in my life is, and I love you said somatic, because what I'm looking for is, if I get activated or triggered, I want to know, I want to feel it in like, where is it happening in my body?
mm,
Like for
mhm,
me, it's in my solar plexus, usually a little bit lower in my belly. And then if I don't, and I'll talk in a moment about what I think one solution is to it, but it'll start to move up through the heart, move up through the throat, and eventually it's in my head. And I
mhm,
feel like now I'm in my head, and now I'm spinning around, like the neural pathways are just firing all of the fear, firing all the ego, firing all the things from way long ago that have nothing to do to the situation I'm in. It may have something to do with it, but the trigger activated it. So what does one do? In my opinion, what one does is become really good at noticing where it is somatically. Like, it's
mhm,
just a bubble at first. Like, it's
mhm,
maybe a little intense. Maybe it feels like champagne bubbles. Everybody's going to have a different somatic experience. But the trick then is to slow it down and get distance from that stimulus to the response and go,
mm,
oh, this is familiar.
mhm,
This is something I've experienced 1,000 times.
mm,
And what's the appropriate response to this activation, rather than
mhm,
a response I had 30 years ago to a similar activation? So we bring
mhm,
our
mhm,
past into our present rather than really
mm,
dealing with the present. Better we can get at just creating that gap between stimulus and response and put the love in it. Like, oh, wait
mm,
a minute, this person didn't mean to cut me off in traffic, or this person didn't mean to cut me off in a conversation, or maybe this person didn't mean what I thought they meant, and I can check it out because now I have a gap, rather than
mhm,
going off on them or shooting a text or an email that's mean spirited to get revenge on something. It's like, slow down.
mm,
Presence is about slowing down. Fill it with love and widen the gap so that the
mm,
light can come in and I can heal it. Because
mhm,
it doesn't help other people when I'm reacting, but it sure doesn't help me when I'm reacting.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, what I'm hearing and what you share is really the like pausing with awareness, that kind of sacred pause button that can notice the part inside that wants to, rip your partner's head off because, she said this or that, or, that initial kind of triggering response that's like, ah, that comes out as that, very intensity. And the awareness piece, I think, is really where that gets lost. Like just came into my mind. I remember a few months back picking up my beloved at the airport, and we're just driving out of the airport, and I just naturally like pulled ahead of a car because he was going the other lane, and this is at a community, this was out of the Porto airport in Portugal at a community retreat center that I'm in the process of buying and landing there. And I drove up, like the guy like literally rushed through the gate. He's like, coming at me in his car, and he's yelling and screaming. And my initial instinct was actually just like a bit of laughter. I'm like, wow, this individual is like clearly triggered. There's something coming up there. Like, I want to have empathy. I want to have compassion. I don't want to have anything to do with where he's at or any like physical proximity, because I could literally feel it wasn't safe. But there was a part of me that like, and I know that my laughing, I think, was just triggering that more in him. And I wasn't trying to. I was just actually laughing at the human experience of people feeling so like done to. Like, I think that was generally, I don't know, but I think there was like, oh, he did something to me, and now I want to, like, that primal instinct that wants to now get even with that situation. I'm going to get you. I'm going to attack you. It felt like I was going back into a bit of like medieval days, but I know it happens all the time in road rage and people's, immediate reaction rather than having the capacity to notice, wow, I'm really pissed right now. Can I observe that inside of me and not need to run that whole story and want to, attack and kill someone because they felt like they got cut off,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can all relate. I can relate to that, and it's a defense mechanism. So, it's how we're wired. Like there's a reason for it, as you said, about safety. Like maybe there's even a place for it sometimes where it's important for me to have a fear response to get safe. But we live in a time now where most of those fear responses aren't real in terms of my safety. So how do I have the awareness to navigate that and to slow it down, to be able to assess what's really going on and what's the most appropriate response? And I just think this is a mark of good leadership. It's a mark of good living. It's a mark of good loving. And it's a practice. And and as you know, Aaron, there's a lot of ways to practice it. People can freeform write. They can meditate. They can do cold thermogenesis. They can take walks in nature. They can do breath work, I think I mentioned. But there's a lot of ways to practice this distance between stimulus and response so that we can respond with a more appropriate solution. So I'd be curious, like, what did you do when this happened? Were you safe, you and your beloved safe? And
yeah, I mean, we were safe. Eventually, I just, kept driving away, and we kind of lost him in traffic. And, for her, actually, it brought up a lot, because from the environment that she grew up in Poland, like there was a lot of that had, come up from different previous situations. So I actually, had to kind of be with her for a little bit and help her kind of process some of what was arising in her nervous system and from past situations as a young girl, and with dealing with a lot of kind of male bodies that had lost control of anger. And this is I'd love to kind of divert into this conversation, especially around two things I'll bring in around like anger and jealousy, because one of the pieces of this kind of overall theme is around love, and this place of how love shows up, but especially romantic love. And I'm curious for you if there's been some like have you ever found times in your life of jealousy? Is that something, that emotion and a thing that you've dealt with in the reference point of love? And what's, has there been anger that circulated around that? Or what's been some of your personal experience around anger and love, especially anger and jealousy, especially as it relates to, being with your beloved or seeing others around, and that very male fire that's like, that's mine. Like where has that been applicable for you?
It's been a big part of my journey. I mean, it
Mm,
is. So going back, it's funny because I think my first girlfriend in high school, I was with her for a long time. Like we dated for like 8 years, and that was unusual in high school. So it went from high school into college. First lover, serious relationship. And oh my God, was I ever jealous. Like
mm,
she was very beautiful. There was a lot of guys attracted to her. And especially at that time in high school and college, people weren't in serious relationships, or at least a lot of my friends weren't. So
mm-hmm,
I had all these rules about how it should be, and they were just getting broken left and right. So I was jealous, and the jealousy led to anger. The anger led to hurt, and the hurt led to just being unreasonable. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
the outcome was never positive. Um, as I've grown as a human being and as a man, I've practiced what real love is, and I love
mm,
I love that you said romantic, because Dr. Mary Holnick, actually at the University of Santa Monica, once in a sharing said to someone, romantic love is ego based. And
mm,
I remember
mm,
at that time I had the hardest time with that. I thought, what does that mean? I love romance. Like romance
mm,
is a beautiful thing. But as I thought about it more, romance had a lot of rules to it. And
mm-hmm,
so as I
mm-hmm,
unwound that in my own consciousness, I started to see where love is love and romantic love is different.
mm,
Like
mm,
unconditional love has, my experience of it is there's a lot less jealousy, if any, a lot less anger, and a lot less. There's for me now at this time in my life, I don't do jealousy. I don't do a lot of anger. I can catch it pretty quickly, but I
mm-hmm,
do hurt. I can move
mm,
into that hurt. But I
mm-hmm,
found that with my wife Veronica, if I say, honey, that really hurt,
mm,
we're in a good place, rather than why the fuck did you do that again? You're always doing
mm,
that. Like that really
mm,
pisses me off. Now we're in a whole different track. So the
mm-hmm,
vulnerability piece we talked about earlier applies here. And I
mm,
found that helps me a lot deal with my own shit in relationship.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How
Yeah,
about you?
well, yeah, I'll share, and I love that you brought in the vulnerability thing, because I think that's such a challenge as well as such a gift for a male body to be able to go and transition from fuck you, like you made me hurt, to like, ooh, like that hurts, and I'm sitting with that, and it creates a space for love and connection to be there, rather than a wall that says, I need my man cave, I need space away from you, you fucked up, whatever it may be. um yeah, for me, it's like I've never actually been a very jealous person like that. That's never been something my general mindset is like, with a partner and things, is if they find something or desire something outside, like go for it. Like if you're going to find something that's going to meet your values more than I am, my soul wants your soul to flourish and be alive. And that's generally how I am. And that's actually weirdly like kind of pissed off some partners. Like my last partner, who I now teach with a bit, was a very fiery Italian woman that like was very jealous and very opinionated, and almost wanted me to be jealous sometimes. So I was trying to like cultivate more of a jealousy thing, just to almost like appease part of her value system. um but I think that
I'm glad that didn't work out for you.
no, I love her. Like we have a beautiful relationship and a
I
lot of
mean
love
the I
now.
mean
And
the
then,
jealousy part. Like
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Um, the
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 jealousy
anger,
part. Yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. The anger bit for me, like, I think the part I had to navigate through was noticing the passive aggressive part of me that could, see and be good in my consciousness and witness, and but underneath was like kind of, passively aggressively creating conflict just to almost be the one that was in control. That's what I noticed myself doing. It was like I could, manipulate situations in a way that would underneath was just my fire, but instead of actually feeling the fire of my anger, I was bringing it to my mind that's really strong and clear and manipulative just to run stories. So I noticed my rewiring of that is when anger and fire does rise up, is to actually, remove myself from the situation the best I can and just do some emotional release tools and move my body and like let the fire and the energy rise through me, because then I can then return to conversation with my partner with a level of like there's more neutrality, there's less of an angry beast inside and more of like a, oh, okay. Like I'm here now. I recognize that you've just given me an opportunity to feel the things that I've needed to feel so that now I can actually be in presence. So thank you for that gift that you gave to me to feel. And that was taking a lot of time to be able to do it that way. Far from perfect, but I think I'm a lot better than where I was before, for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, I hear you, and it's a journey for all of us. I mean, admittedly, for myself, it's been an interesting journey and one I've made progress in. And I would also add, like Inside Out, you mentioned the film. I remember, there's a certain amount of acceptance too for I'm just pissed. Like I don't mean like unproductive or like you said like some someone earlier you had mentioned that maybe had some like actual been harmed physically by someone in their anger. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, just letting some steam off by saying, I'm pissed. This hurts. I'm
Hmm.
angry about this, and I think there's a lot of judgment on anger. And I think that I'm not saying people should be angry. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I'm saying that it's a natural human emotion to feel angry at
Hmm.
times. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it can cause what I call a spiritual bypass. If I just denounce my anger, like I'm never angry and I'm always passive and I'm always peaceful and I'm always like, I'm not that way. I mean, there's times I
Hmm.
can get a little feisty. So I don't think
Hmm.
that's a terrible thing either.
Hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, there's a humanness to our emotions, and there's not a need to bypass it all in some level of spiritual enlightenment. There's actually a gift in being present in what we're feeling and vibrating through our bodies. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we kind of bring this more towards completion, curious if there's anything you'd like to express to the listeners about upcoming projects or creations that are coming through you that you'd like to share. I know you're doing a lot out there in the world and would love to, just give you a moment if there's things you'd like to express of your creativity of your soul that's coming into this world.
I'm just really thank you, Aaron. And I'm just really rounding the bend from last year into this year with a lot of gratitude.
Mm,
I feel like the last number of years have been really hard on a lot of people for a lot of different reasons that we don't need to go into now as we come to completion. But let's just say a lot of people dealing with sadness, isolation, separation, hardship, sicknesses, etc. So I just have a lot of compassion for anybody
mhm,
that's listening to this and has been struggling. And one of the things I'm doing in January, I don't know when you'll post this, but if anybody wants to join the L4 initiative, it's like $99 and all the money goes to a nonprofit. So
mm,
it's just a passion project, and it's just 3 different 90-minute sessions, a community of loving people to reset for a new year. And it's called L4 Light leadership, longevity to life. So we talk about quantum biology, we talk about things that help people to get unstuck and to create forward, not from a place of I have the answers, but from a place of you have the answer. Let's discover what they are. So I would like maybe start the L4 by asking someone like, what lights you up? That's a big question. What lights you up? Light. Like to me, light is living in God's holy thoughts. So what lights you up spiritually? What lights you up physically? And living a life that lights us up is part of the L4. So $100 to be in that, and it all goes to a nonprofit.
Amazing, amazing. I think I might borrow that. I love that. The light, living in God's holy thoughts. I really I resonate with that, and especially around the you could say the expression of how God shows up into our life. Not a religious amorphic God, but this kind of grand organized design of existence that's moving through. So I love that you're doing that. Thank you, brother. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for being the leader that you are. Thank you for showing up in this world, for continuing to live a life of joy and creation and making the impact that you do. I honor you and celebrate you, and very grateful for your time and energy here today.
Well, right back at you. As I said earlier, to me, this is a co-creation, a collaboration between the two of us. And thank you, Aaron, for the progress you've made as a leader in the world, for the work that you're doing, the voice that you are. It's really great to see you, brother, and bless you as you move forward. All kinds of good things coming your way, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and see you next time on Love, Sex, and Leadership.